In tonight's story, I'll take you with me aboard a quiet ocean liner crossing the Atlantic in the late 1920s. A place where the gentle hum of engines blended with distant jazz melodies, and where every hallway seemed to carry an echo from another time. I didn't board the ship looking for mystery, but as we drifted farther from shore, small and curious details began to surface, nothing frightening, just the kind of soft puzzles the night offers when the sea is calm and the world has slowed down. So, settle in, let your breath soften, and join me as I remember those quiet days and even quieter nights on a jazz-age cruise ship. My first full day aboard the Crescentia began not with an alarm or a knock on the door, but with the soft sway of the ship and a ribbon of morning light slipping through the porthole. It was the kind of light that arrives politely, warming the room by degrees, inviting rather than insisting. I lay still for a few moments, listening to the subtle creaks of the vessel, the distant hum of engines, and the occasional muffled footsteps in the hallway, all of it blending into a quiet morning lullaby. When I stepped out onto the deck, the world was washed in pale gold. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction, its surface gently rolling like a long, calm breath. Wooden deck chairs lined the promenade in neat rows, some occupied by passengers wrapped in light blankets, reading or simply gazing out at the horizon. The ship's rails were cool beneath my hands, touched by the lingering chill of dawn. Breakfast was served in a bright dining room filled with sunlight bouncing off polished silver and white porcelain. Everything clinked softly, spoons against bowls, cups settling into saucers, creating a calm rhythm that matched the ship's steady movement. I sat near a window and watched a thin trail of steam rise from my tea, curling softly before disappearing into the warm air. It was there that I first noticed a few of the ship's personalities, not through conversation, but through small mannerisms. An elderly couple sharing a quiet laugh over a crossword puzzle. A young woman sketching the ocean with a charcoal pencil, pausing now and then to tap the eraser rhythmically against the table. A steward gliding effortlessly between the aisles, balancing a tray with the ease of someone who had sailed this route many times. After breakfast, I returned to the deck, drawn by the serene expanse of sky and sea. The gentle footfalls of fellow passengers formed a soft, broken pattern behind me. As I walked along the starboard side, something small caught my attention, not part of the scenery, but etched into it, a set of initials, carved into the wooden railing, 2 letters, intertwined in a subtle, almost hidden way. The kind of marking someone might leave during a moment of reflection or waiting. What struck me wasn't the carving itself, but the familiarity of the letters. They were the same 2 letters that appeared faintly in the corner of the postcard left in my cabin. At first, I simply ran my fingers over the grooves, expecting the wood to feel rough or splintered, but it was smooth, softened by time, polished by years of salty wind and passing hands. The carving didn't stir any alarm in me. Instead, it felt like finding a second seashell on the same stretch of beach, a gentle, wordless suggestion that someone had walked here before me, leaving small traces behind. Nothing more. The breeze picked up slightly, carrying with it the faintest hints of music. Not recorded music, but live, something played with care and without urgency. I followed the sound down the corridor and into the lounge, where a lone violinist was tuning her instrument. She nodded at me politely before drawing the bow across the strings, releasing a slow, warm melody reminiscent of the kind played in twilight cafes. The lounge itself was cozy, filled with plush chairs and small tables arranged for quiet conversations. Art Deco lamps cast soft amber pools of light across the carpet, and the walls were lined with framed posters of earlier voyages, each depicting the ship against different skies and seas. I sat in a corner where the music seemed to float gently toward me, neither too near nor too far. The violinist played for herself more than for an audience, the kind of performance born from habit and affection. The notes unraveled in unhurried spirals, drifting as lightly as dust in sunbeams. As evening arrived, the ship seemed to slip into another personality, still calm, but with the faint glow of the jazz age waking beneath its polished exterior. In the main lounge, a small jazz quartet gathered, a pianist, a clarinetist, a double bassist, and a drummer using brushes instead of sticks, creating a soft, whispering rhythm. Passengers found their seats slowly, some leaning back with eyes half closed. Others tapping their fingers lightly against the armrests. The music that followed was gentle and velvety, the kind that felt less like a performance and more like a warm tide that carried the room along with it. I sat by the window, watching the dark ocean glide by, the moon painting a silver path across its surface. The clarinet's mellow tone curled around the quiet conversations happening nearby. Someone laughed softly. Glasses clinked faintly. A couple swayed in a slow, tender dance near the far corner. The combination of music, motion, and muted lamplight softened everything, the air, the atmosphere, even my own thoughts. The postcard drifted back into my mind, but only as a gentle curiosity. 2 initials on a railing. A message left for the one who finds this. The mysteries of the ship were not loud ones. They whispered rather than called. And in that soft, drifting moment, I realized I wasn't seeking answers, just enjoying the slow unfolding of the journey. When the last notes of the jazz tune faded into the hum of the ship's engines, the night felt even more peaceful than before. I made my way back toward my cabin, the hallway lamps glowing like sleepy stars, and as I settled into bed, the ship rocked ever so slightly, as if offering a lullaby of its own. Night settled gradually on the Crescentia, not with a sudden darkness but with a soft dimming of colors, as if someone were slowly lowering the lights in a grand old theater. The ship seemed to breathe differently at night. The lively notes of jazz faded to memory, replaced by the hum of the engines and the faint rustling of the sea brushing against the hull. Most passengers retired early, leaving the corridors hushed and pleasantly empty. I had always found a certain comfort in wandering quiet places after dusk, so I let myself drift through the ship with no destination in mind. The carpeted hallway muted my steps, and the gentle sway of the vessel felt like the rhythm of a cradle. Steady and sure, the first area I explored was the reading room, though room felt too grand a word for such a modest, peaceful space. The door was slightly ajar, and when I pushed it open, a gentle draft stirred the pages of a book left open on a side table. The lamps glowed in warm pools of amber light, reflecting softly off polished wooden shelves filled with well-worn novels and travelogues from another era. I ran my fingertips along the spines, feeling their gently frayed edges. Titles in faded gold lettering peeked through: Voyages of the North Atlantic, Meditations by the Sea, collected stories of travel and time. Some books seemed untouched in decades, yet the room was cozy. Preserved with the quiet respect of passengers who used it not for reading alone, but for resting in the stillness. I didn't stay long. The atmosphere invited lingering, but my feet carried me onward with a sense of slow curiosity. Outside the reading room, I found a hallway lined with travel posters from the early years of passenger ships. Each one showed sweeping ocean vistas, elegant travelers dressed in white, women with wide-brimmed hats and men in linen suits gazing over endless water. The posters had softened with time, their colors faded to gentle pastels, giving them the dreamlike quality of old postcards. One poster caught my attention more than the others, not because it was brighter or larger. but because a small pencil marking sat lightly in its corner. Nothing bold, just a simple curve of two initials. The same initials from the postcard. And from the carved railing on deck, this time, I felt a quiet recognition, a feeling like spotting a familiar face in a distant crowd. Gentle, not startling, but again, nothing about it felt urgent or eerie. Only softly intriguing, the way a memory flickers at the edge of your mind without fully forming. Further along, I discovered a narrow staircase that wound downward in a slow spiral. The steps vibrated faintly with the deep pulse of the engines below. I descended carefully, one hand brushing the cool brass railing. At the bottom, I stepped into a corridor that felt older than the rest of the ship, quieter, dimmer, and lined with framed photographs in black and white. The pictures showed the ship during her earliest voyages, smiling families on deck chairs, crew members posing proudly beside lifeboats, a group of musicians holding their instruments in a tidy row. People who had traveled long before my time, their expressions frozen in calm moments that seemed untouched by worry. I paused at one photograph, a candid shot of two passengers standing beside the railing. One was writing something on a small postcard, while the other leaned and laughing. Their names were not listed, but the initials tucked discreetly into the bottom corner were the same as before. The ship was beginning to feel like a quiet keeper of someone's old story. As I continued walking, I reached a half-forgotten observation deck near the stern. It was nearly deserted, the lamps lowered to a soft glow. A cool breeze brushed across my face as I stepped outside. The ocean spread out beneath a moonlit sky, the waves reflecting silver like ripples of polished glass. The railing here was older, the wood slightly worn. I rested my hands on it, breathing in the cool air. The engine's hum rose gently from the depths of the ship, steady and comforting, like the heartbeat of something ancient and kind. There was no sound except the ship's slow glide through the water, standing there. I felt the same soft curiosity that had accompanied me since boarding, not a puzzle to solve, but a whisper of someone's past gently brushing against my present. The initials, the postcard, the markings on the poster. They all felt like quiet echoes rather than clues, and in that moment, it struck me how ships, especially those that crossed vast oceans, carried stories the way the ocean carried waves, layered, mingled, overlapping, each one touching the next without losing its shape. I stayed there for a while, letting the night envelop me in its gentle embrace. Nothing moved except the shimmering water below and the slow drift of clouds across the moon. Eventually, when the cool breeze began to settle into my clothing, I turned back toward my cabin, the corridor lamps flickering softly as if growing drowsy themselves. As I walked the final stretch of hallway, the engine's quiet rhythm and the faint scent of polished wood guided me like a lullaby. I slipped inside my cabin and lay down, the room cradling me in warm silence. Before sleep took me, I thought once more about the postcard waiting on my desk. For the one who finds this, the ship whispered around me as the night deepened, and then I drifted gently into dreams. The next afternoon unfolded slowly, wrapped in a warm, almost drowsy sunlight. There was a stillness in the air that made every sound softer, the clink of cups at tea service, the easy murmur of conversation, the low splash of waves brushing against the hull. It felt as though the Crescentia herself had settled deeper into the ocean, content and unhurried. I spent much of the day sitting on the promenade deck, watching the horizon stretch endlessly ahead. The sea shimmered in soft blues and silvers, shifting like folds of silk. Occasionally, a steward would pass by, offering refreshments with a quiet smile. Other passengers wandered in and out, some reading, some napping, some simply gazing outward as if the water held all the answers they didn't need to ask. My mind wandered often to the small hints left behind, the carved initials, the faint pencil marks, the quiet postcard resting back in my cabin. None of it consumed me, it merely drifted into my thoughts like a breeze through lightly opened curtains. By late afternoon, a gentle curiosity nudged me to visit the ship's purser, a tidy fellow with round spectacles and a voice that reminded me of softly turned pages. I didn't intend to ask anything directly, only to browse. The purser kept a selection of old passenger records on display, more as historical decor than reference material. Bound in navy leather and edged in gold, the books looked as though they belonged in the study of a university library rather than a ship. He allowed me to leaf through a few of them, remarking kindly that the early years of the Crescentia held many stories, if one looks with patience. I smiled at that. Patience seemed to be what the voyage was offering in abundance. As I slowly turned the thick pages, I came upon a list from a sailing years earlier. Among the names, written in elegant, slightly slanted handwriting, were two that shared the same initials I had stumbled upon throughout the ship. They were listed side by side, as if traveling together. No details accompanied the names, just a quiet presence on the page, something about seeing them in ink, real passengers who once walked these decks, brought a feeling of gentle closeness. Not a mystery to solve, but a story to imagine. Later that evening, I returned to the observation deck where I had spent the previous night. The sky was just beginning to blush with shades of peach and lavender. The air was still warm from the sun, but carried the first hints of evening coolness. I rested my hands on the railing, feeling the wood's smooth grooves beneath my fingers. As the ship sailed forward, the pieces of the gentle story began fitting together in my mind, not as facts but as impressions. I pictured the two passengers from years ago, perhaps friends, perhaps something more, traveling together across the Atlantic, leaving small tokens and markings in the places that meant something to them. A shared moment on deck. A sketch made on a poster. A postcard left behind for someone else to find, so their presence would linger quietly on the ship long after they disembarked. It wasn't a mystery with a grand reveal. It was simply a soft reminder that humans leave traces, tiny echoes, in the places they love. And the Crescentia, drifting gently through time, had kept those echoes safe. Inspired, I returned to my cabin. The postcard was still on the desk where I had left it, its edges slightly curled from age. I turned it over in my hands, imagining the person who had written that one incomplete line, "For the one who finds this." The phrase felt like a whisper shared between travelers across different years. I decided then, without any particular reasoning, only a sense of warm continuity, to write a note of my own. I took a blank postcard from the writing set provided in the cabin, one with a soft watercolor sketch of the ocean at dawn. On the back, in small, unhurried letters, I wrote, "To whomever drifts these halls after me, may the sea bring you calm winds and quiet thoughts." I placed it gently inside the wardrobe's top drawer, where someone might find it later, perhaps not soon, perhaps years from now. A quiet thread from one traveler to another. When I returned to the observation deck, twilight had deepened. A violinist, perhaps the same one from the lounge, stood near the railing, playing a slow, wistful melody. Only a few passengers lingered nearby, wrapped in shawls or leaning against the railing, eyes softened by the fading light. I listened as the notes curled upward into the cooling sky, blending with the hush of waves. The music suited the moment perfectly, neither sad nor cheerful, simply thoughtful, like the closing lines of a letter. As the first stars appeared, I felt a warm certainty settling over me. The old postcard, the markings, the photographs. They weren't a puzzle at all. They were someone's quiet love story, left in gentle fragments. And the Crescentia, steady and patient, had carried them forward. The ship glided on, silent and luminous beneath the unfolding night. And I felt peacefully connected, not only to the present moment, but to everyone who had drifted through these same hallways across time. The skiff drifted the last few meters on its own, as if it, too, knew the journey was ending. Dawn had finished its slow unfurling, and the world was painted in colors so soft they seemed to hush the shoreline. When my feet met the wooden planks of the dock, the boards felt warmer than they should have at this hour, welcoming, familiar, almost like an old friend stretching awake. Behind me, the river continued its patient murmuring. It didn't call me back, nor did it urge me forward. It simply flowed, steady and unconcerned, as though it had already folded this small voyage into its endless memory. And I realized that was enough. Some moments don't need to be held tightly, they only need to be lived once. Fully, as I walked toward the path inland, the air carried a clarity I hadn't noticed before, an openness created by slowness, by listening. Traveling without haste had stripped the noise from my thoughts, leaving behind soft impressions that felt truer than anything I could articulate, the hollow sound of water against the hull, the quiet pulse of early birdsong, the gentle weight of stories drifting up from places older than I could comprehend. I didn't leave the boat with questions. There was nothing to solve, nothing to chase down. Only a sense that the world speaks in small ways, and that I had finally remembered how to hear it. The light grew warmer. I exhaled, long, unforced, and the morning seemed to exhale with me. Then, with no ceremony at all, I stepped fully onto the shore and let the journey slip peacefully behind me.